Okay, I want you to picture a scenario. And I think this is something that is, well, it's universally
Oh,
terrifying.
yeah.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter if you are, 18 or 48, or even if you're the most extroverted person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting in a room, maybe it's a job interview, could be the first day of a college class, maybe just a casual meeting.
Right. The stakes are different, but the feeling is the same.
Exactly. And then someone turns to you, they make eye contact, and they ask the 5 deadliest words in the English language. So tell me about yourself.
It is incredible, isn't it? Just hearing you say that,
Mm.
I can feel a little spike of adrenaline. It's such a simple question.
But it triggers this massive, I don't know, fight or flight response.
It does.
Instant sweaty palms, right? The brain just goes completely blank. You forget your own name.
You forget everything. It's like the hard drive just gets wiped clean. And what's interesting is that this happens even to people who were, relatively fluent.
That's the key, I think. It's rarely a language issue. It's a processing issue. Performance anxiety.
And for language learners, that anxiety is multiplied.
Mm.
I mean, you aren't just worried about what you're saying, you're also hyperanalyzing how you're saying it.
You're trying to audition and communicate at the same time.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the source material we're diving into today. We are looking at a methodology from the Fluent Slowly series. And the mission today is very specific. We are going to master the art of the self-introduction. But looking at this, it's not just about memorizing a script, is it? It seems to be more of a psychological reset.
Oh, absolutely. The source makes a really crucial distinction right at the start. It argues that we have the wrong goal.
The wrong goal. How so?
Well, most people think the goal of a self-introduction is to show off their perfect English.
Yeah.
You want to sound smart, sophisticated, error-free.
Which, that sounds logical, right? If I'm in an interview, I want to be perfect.
But the source argues that's a trap. It shifts the goalpost. It says a self-introduction is actually about clear and simple communication.
Okay.
It explicitly states, people don't want your grammar. They want to understand you.
That sounds nice in theory, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
So please.
If I walk into a high-stakes meeting and my grammar's all over the place, surely people just wanting to understand me isn't going to save me.
That's a fair pushback. But let's look at what the source calls the confidence equation. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They present a literal formula. Bad English plus confidence equals good communication.
See, that's the part I stuck on. Bad English plus confidence equals good communication. It feels counterintuitive. I'd assume bad English equals a bad impression.
It does, but we have to define confidence here. The source isn't talking about being arrogant or, loud while making mistakes.
Right.
They define confidence in this context as clarity and calmness. Now, think about the alternative they provide. Good English plus fear equals bad communication.
Okay, that I can visualize. The person who knows all the words but is mumbling or looking at their shoes or just rushing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From a cognitive science perspective, think about what anxiety does. When you're fearful, your working memory, your brain's RAM, is consumed by the threat response.
So you don't have the processing power left to access that fancy vocabulary you studied.
You literally don't. So if you aim for perfect English, you overload your own system and you crash. You freeze.
So the argument is that a simple, maybe slightly broken sentence delivered with a smile and eye contact is actually more effective.
Then a complex, grammatically perfect sentence delivered with panic. Precisely.
Wow.
Because communication is connection. If you are calm, the listener feels calm. If you're panicked, the listener feels stressed. The source is asking you to prioritize the connection over the perfection.
It's prioritizing the listener's experience over your own ego, in a way.
That is a beautiful way to put it, yes.
So if we accept that we need to stop trying to be Shakespeare and just try to be clear, what does that actually look like? The source outlines what they call the golden rule of self-introductions.
Right. And this is an exercise in strategic minimalism. The source boils it down to just 3 components. If you're panicking, you just need to remember these 3 things.
Okay, what are they?
Who you are, what you do, and something extra about you.
What? Extra?
That's it.
It feels, I don't know, almost too simple. I feel like when we introduce ourselves, especially in professional settings, we try to write a whole biography.
And that's where we lose people.
Yeah.
The source gives a template for what they call the absolute beginner, using the example of Ria. He goes, "Hi, I'm Ria. I'm from India. I'm a student."
3 sentences, that's maybe 5 seconds.
If that. But let's analyze why this works. It's not just that it's easy for Ria to say. It's that it's easy for the listener to process. When you meet someone new, Your brain is working hard to sort of categorize them. If Ria gives a complex, winding sentence, the listener has to work too hard.
So simplicity is actually a kindness to the person you're talking to.
Exactly. It lowers the cognitive load for everyone in the room.
Now, I'm Ria, I'm a student is great, but let's say our listener is a bit beyond that absolute beginner stage. They want to put a little more meat on the bone. The source gives us the Rohan example.
Right. And this follows the same structure, but it fleshes out that third point, the something extra. So the Rohan example is, hello, my name is Rohan. I am from India. I am a student. I like reading books and listening to music.
Okay, hearing you say that there's a distinct rhythm to it. I like.
Yes, the syntax is repetitive, but that repetition creates a cadence. It's rhythmic. It stabilizes the speaker. It's very hard to trip over your own tongue when the sentence structure is identical for 3 lines in a row.
It's like a stabilizer on a bike.
It is, exactly.
Okay, so we have the basic framework. Name, origin, role, interest. But context is everything. I want to walk through what I think of as the life cycle of a learner. Let's imagine a person growing through these stages. First, they're in school. The source introduces us to the Aman scenario.
So Aman is in a school or college setting. The environment here is about potential. Listen to how he adapts the script.
Hello, my name is Amma. I'm studying in class 10. My favorite subject is English. I want to become a teacher.
He kept the name. For what he does, he specified his class. But for the extra part, he pivoted. He didn't say, I like cricket. He said, I want to become a teacher.
This is a tactic called future casting. In a school setting, your identity isn't just who you are now, it's who you're becoming.
Right.
By stating an ambition, Aman signals maturity. He gives the teacher or the class a hook to understand his motivation.
It changes the power dynamic in the room slightly. He's not just a student, he's a future colleague.
Correct. It commands a different kind of respect. Okay, so Aman graduates. He knows who he is. Now the stakes get higher. He needs a job. Money's on the line. The panic is way higher.
And this is where people start throwing around corporate buzzwords they found on LinkedIn.
And that is the trap. The source gives us the example of Neha Sharma in a job interview. Now, pay close attention to what she doesn't say. She says, "Good morning. My name is Neha Sharma. I am a graduate in commerce. I have 2 years of experience in sales. I'm a hardworking and honest person."
I'm a hardworking and honest person. I have to be honest, when I read that, I winced a little. It felt, a bit old-fashioned, a little subjective.
I get that.
Usually people list skills. Oh, yeah, Python, I know Excel. Can you really just walk into an interview and say, I am honest?
I actually think this is the most brilliant part of the source material. Think about the context. The interviewer has her resume.
Right.
They know she knows Excel. They know she has a commerce degree. That's on the paper.
So reciting it is just redundant. Completely. The interview is a vibe check. They're trying to figure out, is this a person I can trust? Is this someone I want to sit next to for 40 hours a week? By explicitly stating character traits, hardworking, honest, she's addressing the hidden question in the room.
She's answering the human question, not the technical question.
Exactly. And look at the vocabulary. Simple, foundational words. If she had said, I am a conscientious and diligent individual with a propensity for integrity, she sounds like a robot.
Or like someone hiding behind a thesaurus.
Right. But I am honest hits you in the gut. Complexity breeds suspicion. Simplicity breeds trust.
That's a really powerful takeaway. Complexity breeds suspicion. Okay, so Neha gets the job. She's in. Now she's Raj in the business meeting.
Now the currency changes again. In school, it was potential. In the interview, it was trust. In a business meeting, the currency is time.
Time is money.
And Raj says, hello, everyone. I am Raj. I work in the marketing department. I am happy to be here.
Woo! Done.
It's ruthless efficiency. Name, department sentiment. I am happy to be here. It's polite. It establishes his role so everyone knows why he's at the table. And then he stops talking.
He doesn't ramble about his commute or his weekend.
No. And in a corporate setting, brevity is often mistaken for confidence. If you speak briefly, people assume you're important.
You're respecting the room's time.
Precisely.
So we have the golden rule, and we have these life cycle scenarios. But the source also includes a very specific list of don'ts. The anti-advice. And I feel like we need to unpack these because they're habits I think 90% of learners have.
Oh, absolutely. The first one is a classic nervous tick. Do not speak too fast.
Why do we do that? Is it just to get it over with?
It's the flight response. Your brain says this situation is a threat. Escape. So you speed up your speech to get to the finish line.
But to the listener, it just signals insecurity.
And worse, it can make you unintelligible.
Okay, the source also warns, Do not memorize long paragraphs, which, again, I see people doing. They write out a whole script.
This is what I call the fragility problem. If you memorize a paragraph like a monologue and you forget just one word, what happens?
The whole thing collapses. You're stuck.
Exactly. But if you just remember the structure, name, place, work, interest, you can't really forget your lines because they aren't lines. They're facts about your life. You're just slotting facts into a framework.
But the biggest one, and I want to spend a moment here because the source really emphasizes this as a cardinal sin, is do not apologize for your English.
This is so critical. How often do you hear someone start with, "Sorry, my English is a little weak"?
All the time. And I think people do it because they think it's polite. They're trying to lower expectations.
They think it's polite, but it's actually a status play.
Yeah.
When you apologize, you are framing the entire interaction negatively before it even begins.
You're telling the listener, this is going to be difficult.
And you're priming them to look for mistakes.
Yeah.
If you tell me you're bad, I'm going to notice every error. If you just speak, I'm listening to your story. The source is very strict on this. Never apologize.
So instead of apologizing, the source lists the correct behaviors. Smile, speak slowly, use pauses. That advice, speak slowly with pauses, is so hard to follow when you're nervous. A pause feels like an eternity.
But to the listener, a pause sounds like confidence. It sounds like thinking. It commands attention. Silence is a power move.
Okay, so we've covered the minimum viable product of introductions, but I know we have listeners thinking, okay, I can do I am Rohan, but I've been learning for a while. I want to sound more professional.
This is where we need to look at the advanced section of the source. And this is really valuable because it shows how small tweaks can completely change the storytelling quality of your intro. We move from the Rohan level to the Ankit level.
Let's break down the Ankit example line by line because the shifts here are subtle, but they make a huge difference.
Okay, so instead of saying I am from India, Ankit says I am originally from Kolkata, but now I live in Delhi.
Originally from, but now I live in Nowali, but now I live in India. Why is that better?
It adds a narrative arc. It tells a mini story of movement and change. It subtly implies adaptability. I was there, now I am here.
That's a great point. It adds dimension.
Yeah.
Then he says, I work as a graphic designer.
Notice the difference. I am a graphic designer versus I work as a graphic designer.
I am versus I work as.
I am is identity. I work as is a role. It just sounds slightly more detached and professional. It's a very subtle marker of business English.
And finally, instead of the repetitive I like, he says, in my free time, I enjoy photography and traveling.
In my free time. It sets a boundary. It signals, I'm done with work, now here's a personal detail. And enjoy is just a softer, more mature verb than like.
But notice, even at this advanced level, he isn't using words like facilitate or synergize.
No, it's still simple English. He's just using better connecting phrases. He's painting a clearer picture, but he hasn't abandoned the core philosophy of clarity.
So we understand the structure. We get the psychology. How do we actually install this into our brains? Because understanding it is one thing, but doing it when a CEO is staring at you is another.
This is the gym workout for your mouth. You have to build the muscle memory. The source suggests a 3-step process to trigger neuroplasticity.
Step 1.
Listen to the model. Just hear the rhythm.
Step 2.
Listen again while reading. Connect the sound to the text.
And step 3, the one everyone skips?
Speak your own version.
Yeah.
Out loud. You have to physically say the words.
Why is the out loud part so non-negotiable?
Because your mouth has muscles. If you've never physically coordinated your tongue and lips to say, I work as a graphic designer, you will stumble when you try it under pressure. You have to rewire that brain-to-tongue pathway.
The source talks about creating your own real English version, and I love that phrasing. Not perfect English, real English.
It's a grounding concept. Real means authentic to you.
So if we pull all this together, why does it matter so much? Is it just about getting through the first 30 seconds of a meeting? The source calls this a gateway skill.
I think that is the perfect term for it. Think about the opportunity cost of not having this skill. If you're terrified of the introduction, what do?
You avoid the networking event? You stay silent in the meeting?
You don't approach the person at the conference. You shut the door before it even opens.
Yeah.
But if you master this, if you know that, no matter what, you can handle the first 60 seconds of any interaction with calm clarity. your baseline anxiety just drops.
And when your anxiety drops, your listening improves.
You start asking questions. You start making connections. You actually start to learn. You enter a growth loop instead of a fear loop.
It's the foundation of your entire social identity in a new language. It's amazing how something so small, 4 sentences, can be the key to unlocking all of that.
It's the key to the castle.
So, to our listener right now, who might be driving or doing dishes, the next time someone looks at you and says, "Tell me about yourself," don't let the panic win.
No, you don't need a monologue. You don't need big words.
You just need your name, your place, your work.
And one thing you love. That is your story. And simple stories are the best stories.
I want to leave you with a final thought today. We spend so much energy apologizing for the words we don't know. We say sorry for our grammar, sorry for our accent. But imagine this. If you stopped apologizing for what you don't know and simply focused on sharing the few things you do know with total confidence, how much more of you would the world actually get to see?
That is the question to ask.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.